Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a special bonus episode of Fan Behavior and F1 podcast. I'm Zoe. I'm with Hannah.
Hello.
And we are so lucky and so fortunate to be joined by a good friend, a just star in the F1 community, Manvi, the host of the Females in Motorsport podcast. Manvi, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be back on fan behavior.
We are just so honored to have you. We were fortunate enough. I was thinking back to when we first met, and it was weird. It's almost been a year, by the way,
Oh, friend
which
anniversary.
is fun.
I can't
Um,
believe it's only been a year.
I
That's true.
know,
Yeah.
but I was going back through my photos because we met at the Coda event last
Mhm.
summer. I think it was like early June,
Yeah.
and we met at that breakfast thing that we were having. Remember?
Yes.
And I was just thinking back to that, and it was just funny to me. And this sounds so dumb because of course every person you meet at some point for the first time, but I was like, oh yeah, like I didn't know her at this
Yeah. Yeah.
breakfast.
No,
That's
it's so
hilarious.
crazy. I remember it was us. It was Emma from Track Talk,
Yes.
Elizabeth Blackstock, the writer, and we were all, I think, meeting each other for the first time in
Yeah,
person. Yeah. That was such a wholesome day, though.
it was a wholesome day,
So
but I
great.
do remember it was just so kind of like because we kind of all knew each other peripherally, but not really. And so I don't know, it was just a funny breakfast. Like those events are funny because you just get together and you're supposed to just have a meal with people that you only sort of kind
Yeah.
of know. But it worked out because everyone at the table was
And I
wonderful.
feel like something happened. Okay, am I
No, something,
misremembering? Some like news broke, and we were
yes.
all, and I was like, oh my God. Okay, actually, I don't know why. I think it was this is
Because I
this
was in
is
the
no,
bathroom when
I
it
remember
happened.
what it was. I think it was the news that Daniel Ricciardo and Will Arnett were gonna do that
I
whatever
think
they
you're
did.
right. That was
I didn't
short-lived,
know.
wasn't it?
Well, how random.
Yeah, because I think I
Oh
went to
my
the bathroom, I
God.
came back, and everyone was kind of like, "Wait, what? What's going on?" And I was like, "What happened?"
Well, that only lasted for one
Well, sure.
race.
Yes. Oh my God. That
How
was a really, really nice day. Because also it's one of those things where you just don't know if you'll all get along, but we all just got
exactly.
along so well.
Yeah,
Which is nice.
It was
yeah, that
great.
was a fun trip.
But the reason we're having you on here today is to discuss F1 Academy because you are really a pioneer of F1 Academy, I would say. On your podcast, you have had drivers on your show. You talked about the series in so many wonderful ways. You were a massive part of the F1 Academy experience back in Austin last year. You just had a lot of you have a lot of knowledge. You're very smart. And we wanted to have you on because, as people know, we are going to be seeing another F1 Academy weekend this weekend in Miami. We're both going to be there for it, which is very exciting. And just kind of wanting to educate people. I think there's a lot of listeners that we have, just people in general, who want to support this series, want to know more about it, but kind of don't really know where to start or just want the basics. And
Mhm.
so that's what we're going to be discussing today. Um, so just to kind of kick things off, can you share a little bit about what an F1 Academy weekend is like from kind of start to finish? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that it's very different from a Formula One weekend.
Yeah, so for anyone who was following the series last year, it's actually changed quite a bit from last year to this year. Last year, we used to have three races, there were two qualifying sessions, the point system was very different. This year, I think it's a little bit more streamlined and easier to follow. So now there's basically race one and race two. They both have equal weightage in points, and the point system is the same as F1. So it
Okay.
goes like 25 and then all the way down. And then we also have one qualifying session, not two anymore. So it's actually funny because it's basically for race one, it's every driver's like first fastest time. And then for this race two, it's the driver's second fastest time, which is
Okay.
not something I have seen anywhere else. It's something I had to get used to
Yeah.
because you're just so used to seeing the fastest time being the one that matters. But so that's kind of like the new change this year. So it's basically just two races, sometimes two practice sessions, but only one qualifying session now.
Very smart. And so the races are on Saturday and Sunday, right? Qualifying's
I
on
think it
Friday?
depends
Okay.
on the weekend. Like I think in Jeddah it was Friday and Saturday, but I
Right.
think in Miami it's going to be Saturday and Sunday. So again, I think it just depends. And it also depends on how many other junior series are participating
Mhm.
in that weekend.
Right. So it's going to be jam-packed for anyone that's watching Miami, either at the race or at home. It's going to be jam-packed because it's also a sprint race weekend
Yeah.
for Formula One. So it's really going to be like bus club, another club,
Yeah.
another club.
100%. It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how like the drivers are selected for F1 Academy? Is it similar to Formula One and other series, or is there any difference to it?
Yeah, so I think honestly, with F1, we know that the teams are kind of always looking out at the F2 drivers and seeing their progress. Maybe all these academies, like Red Bull Academy, Williams Academies, they also kind of have people to look out for, talent. I think it's the same with F1 Academy. They're kind of always looking out. And I think this year was probably a little bit more seamless if I had to guess, just because now all these teams actually have like a stake in
Yeah.
all these different drivers. So it's really coming up from these academies that they have actual recruiters who are looking at like who do we want to support this year and who do we kind of want to see grow in our academies. Some drivers like Abby Pulling was already with Alpine, so Alpine actually supported them last year as well. Her livery was very different from her other two her teammates. So it really depends on, who is picking you, but it's usually very, very similar to any other junior series.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people are kind of get confused about now that the Formula
Mhm.
One teams have liveries and they're like a part of the academy. There's the drivers who are already part of that F1 team's
Right.
academy, and then there's other drivers who are not, but they're still being supported by the Formula One teams.
Yeah, Formula One teams, and then there's drivers who just have like brand sponsorships now. Like
Exactly.
Mhm.
I can't remember what the others, Charlotte Tilbury.
Right.
So yeah, it's
Exactly.
it's it's like it's very different from last year. I know that last year it was very difficult for a lot of people to follow the season
Yes.
because it wasn't broadcast. I think this year we're already seeing a lot more eyeballs, and I think I'm actually kind of happy that the race weekend formats become a little bit easier to follow.
Yeah.
The F1 teams are participating now because all of these things are eventually just making it easier for all these young drivers to get more exposure.
Yeah, and I just want to say too, because when the first race happened or the first round happened in Saudi Arabia, we got a lot of people who were like, "How do I watch it? How can I find it?" And just before, I forget, you can see everything on YouTube, which I feel like makes it very easy. Like
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
race, the like everything's there. And then even on their channel, they have videos that kind of explain the different teams and the breakdown of which people are on each team. So if you're wanting like a nice overview of all of that, check out the F1 Academy YouTube because you'll get all the information there.
Yeah, and
Um,
even the website is a very good resource. They
yes.
have a guide to
Yes.
everything. They've really spruced it up from last year, so it's a good place to start.
If someone's tuning in for the very first time this weekend, who are some of the drivers that people should be looking out for? Who are some of the
Hmm.
names that people are saying, okay, she's got a future in not just F1 Academy, but also future racing series?
Oh, that's a great question. So there are some drivers who've joined the series this year that were not there last year. Dorian Pan is one. I think she's been doing really great. Of course, she was part of Iron Dames. She already Jeddah, she almost won, and then she was disqualified, unfortunately. Abby Pullen took the win, and she was there last year and she did great. I think those are two drivers who are very promising. I will say that there's only been one race so far, so it's very, very difficult to say who is one to look out for, especially in terms of performance. Some of these drivers are new to F1 Academy completely, like Leah Block,
Right.
but she's a rally racer and she's fantastic. So I think it really depends, and it's very, very early to say who it is. I would say one of my personal favorites is Dorian Pan. Always loved her. She's doing absolutely amazing. And I also love to see Abby Pulling's growth since last year. So those are the two I'm looking out for.
Love it. And you kind of mentioned earlier the sponsors like Charlotte Tilbury, Tommy Hilfiger. I think I'm really excited to see some like more female focused brands coming in. But we just heard last week that American Express joined as a sponsor for the Academy Grid. Is there a dream sponsor that you would like to see in F1 Academy, or anyone that you think would be a really good fit for not just the series, but also the female audience in general?
I really want more beauty brands in F1
Yeah.
Academy. I doesn't have to be makeup brands. You know, not every driver is going to wear makeup, which is fine. I had Abby on the podcast and she said the exact same thing to me. She's like, I don't really wear makeup like at all. But even doing that shoot with Charlotte Tilbury, it felt special. It felt fun.
Yeah.
I think it has to be a makeup brand, but I really want to see like hair care brands,
Yeah.
skincare brands. Like Elf Skin has a stake with Catherine Legg with Indy. And I think that's really great. I would love to see more skincare brands
Yeah.
in F1 Academy. I think hair, maybe even some fashion brands. Like Tommy Hilfiger already, of course, has a sponsorship, which is great. But yeah, I feel like we're seeing this so much in WNBA,
Mm-hmm.
in soccer, where we're seeing brands like Dove and Glossier have brand partnerships. And it's paying off for them. It really is. And we're seeing more and more beauty brands trying to break into the space. And I feel like maybe because the series is so new and brands are still kind of figuring out how to even work with F1, that's been a
Yeah.
little bit of a slow burn. But I really think it's a missed opportunity for a brand to not enter F1 Academy right now.
Agreed.
I just had an idea. Skims should become
Skims
a
would be
brand
nice.
partner.
Okay.
Come on, Kim.
I'm not proud of this, but I'm also a little bit proud of this. I really want like a fast fashion brand to do something in like a motorsport. Not
Yeah.
because I support fast fashion, absolutely not. But if you're
Because they're
gonna
fast. They're all about speed,
Yeah.
you know?
I just feel like, you know, a brand should be able to, you know, kind of use that terminology and like, you know,
Yeah.
spin. This is a PR person in me talking, but I really
Yeah.
feel this in my head.
But it's
Or
also just the obvious of like the eyeballs on it. Like, yes, it's not great, but like just a brand like that would help get more eyes potentially on the
100%.
sport itself.
maybe Taylor Swift can get herself a
Oh my God.
team. Maybe she'll go to Miami this weekend and she'll be
I'm
inspired
manifesting.
by the she'll be inspired by them and she'll say, you know, and Swift Racing. I mean, Red Flags already brought this up.
I was gonna
but
say,
they-
I was like, I've heard that somewhere.
but that's such a great name.
It is
for
such
it-
a great
for-
name.
Or for some, you know, any sort of racing team. So
Yeah.
Taylor, if you're listening.
I feel like we were also, I think everybody thought that she might come to the US GP also. I feel like this was the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now there's, you know, Travis Kelce being an Alpine investor, like I think it's pretty high likelihood that he'll be in Miami this year. So if she's wanting to tag along, just everyone keep their eyes in, you know,
Yeah.
stand alert because you never know what
I just want to see her from like a close distance, you know?
yeah, we'll have to see how we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, then so I don't know, I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago, there were some comments from Max that went viral, him talking about F1 Academy. And I thought that they were very interesting. And I actually just want to read his quote in case anyone missed it. But he was asked about F1 Academy, and this is what he said. It is good that Formula One is now paying extra attention to women in motorsport with F1 Academy, although I have question marks about how they approach it. The cars they drive are far too slow. If you ever want to get them into Formula One, it really has to go to a higher level. It's nice that girls are now sponsored by Formula One teams, but what are we actually helping them with? There is no next step for them now. The gap to a Formula 4 car, for example, is already too big. So I wanted to just get your thoughts on what he said. I know Abby had a response to that, which I thought was an interesting, like a very thoughtful response. But what were your initial thoughts after those comments went viral?
Yeah, I think number one is great that he's thinking about it critically from his perspective, right? I think it's really important that F1 drivers do participate in these conversations. Like, even if we don't agree with what he's saying, we're talking about it now. So I want to acknowledge that for better or for worse, I definitely am happy that he's actually critically thinking about the series. I think with respect to what Abby said, which I think is a really good point, I don't know if Max knows that the winner of F1 Academy actually gets a seat in Formula Regional, which is a great step for an F1 Academy driver to move up the Formula series. And I think now that we have more brand sponsors coming in, F1 teams have, putting in money here, I do think these are all really big steps to take. And I don't necessarily agree that, we're not that, oh, we need to think about this a little bit more. It's not going to work. Like, I'm by nature an optimist anyway. So I feel like I'm also comparing this to W Series, for example. Now, W Series, I will die on this hill that F1 Academy would not exist without W Series. W Series was the first one who brought up this conversation. And the main reason why, unfortunately, it could not continue was finances. And F1 Academy is kind of solving that issue as it's going. We have these new sponsors, F1 is putting in money. So I don't see any reason why the series would fail. I don't want to believe that the drivers are going to be in F1 Academy and not get a seat anywhere else. Of course, there are drivers from last year in F1 Academy who didn't have a seat this year, and they're not driving any big series this year. But I think it does go to show that when you're a young driver, this can happen in any junior series. It's not an F1 Academy specific problem. So I don't necessarily agree with what he said, although I will say there have been a lot of changes since he made those comments as well, like American Express joined the roster and all those things. So I don't know, who knows, maybe next year he'll think differently. Hopefully everybody's going to think differently. We'll all think differently.
Right.
But again, I will say that I'm happy that at least we're having these conversations and these things are coming up in press conferences.
Right. Well, and also too, I feel like it's I women have been so underserved when it comes to getting opportunities in well, I mean, any kind of motorsport, that you have to start somewhere. You can't it's not just going to be a perfect solution right out of the gate and everything's going to be like, all right, boom, 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 this is how it's going to work. And it's just very streamlined. You have to start somewhere. And the hope, I think, too, is that it gets to, because I've heard a lot of comments about, oh, well, these drivers are too old. Some of these drivers are too old. And then at this point, it's kind of like, there's no real room for them to go anywhere else. But I think hopefully when this continues, the drivers that are coming into the academy will be younger drivers, like you would see in a Formula 4 category or Formula 3 category, who are getting that experience at a younger age and then able to progress accordingly. It's all gonna, I mean, again, we're only in year 2. So you got to build somewhere. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually think the start was W Series. It wasn't F1 Academy.
Right.
And we're already making progress. F1 Academy also has karting programs where they're pumping in money in karting series and karting spaces in the UK. So they're already kind of, going even deeper down and finding drivers at a younger age. I think slowly and steady. I mean, again, I'm an optimist. I'm going to believe that we're going to see some changes happen. And hopefully this is going to help drive, women into F1 someday.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Zoe mentioned this earlier, I think, but you were like very involved in the F1 Academy, like paddock last year at Coda. Can you just talk a little bit about like your experience there, what your favorite part about that experience was?
Honestly, it's like, I know it just happened like in October, so it's not like that long ago.
That's true, yeah.
But it feels like it was like years ago. I don't know why. I will say it was probably one of the most rewarding weeks of my entire probably my entire life, just because I mean you guys were there in Austin, it gets very stressful, but it's also very fun and very rewarding. That's probably the best way I can explain it. I was very, very lucky that I went with females in motorsport. So I was in the F1 Academy paddock and I was able to interact with the drivers, make some fun content with them. I was there like morning to day. Like I was there in the morning. We were sitting in the tents with the drivers sometimes, like interacting with their families. It was very, very wholesome. I had a chance to go into the F1 paddock. So that's why I can say the F1 Academy paddock was very different. It was much smaller, of course, as most junior category paddocks are smaller. But everybody was just hanging out in this one catering tent. All the families were sitting there of the drivers and they were all talking to each other and like cheering on their kids who they can see on track on the TVs. It was very, very wholesome. And you could also see the drivers interacting with each other all the time.
Yeah.
These are all, they're all young girls. They've all already come together through karting and other series. They already all know each other. And it was really nice to see how they were all supporting each other.
Mhm.
And I think it was great when we had drivers, like we had Lewis Hamilton come into the paddock and, actually interact with all the girls, as well as, of course, Susie Wolf was there as well. So I think all those things from me were, I never expected I would ever be able to, see that in my life. But once I got over that, it was also just really nice to actually be a part of that setting and see all of these drivers. Because I think, of course, we're all F1 fans, and that's how we start watching F1 Academy and all these things.
Yeah.
But F1 has this, this glamour about it, and it's also exciting, and it's like, so untouchable, this whole vibe.
Yeah.
But F1 Academy, it felt very wholesome and very grounded, and I was not expecting that, and it was amazing. It was just, oh, it was just beautiful.
I want to also say for anyone that's going to Miami, you can actually, if you have whatever ticket you have, you can actually go to the F1 Academy. I think the paddock actually, there'll be periods of time throughout the weekend where you'll actually be able to go and like see the cars up close and actually really like take in that whole experience and environment. I don't have the exact information about when those times are and stuff, so make sure to keep track on the internet and stuff. And I'm sure if we find anything out, we'll post it to social media. But if you're going this weekend, you should definitely go and check it out and see the cars, try to see the drivers, just kind of be a part of that experience. Because as you said, Formula One, it's very sort of like, good luck trying to get into this secret space where only a select few are allowed in. And Formula One or Formula Academy, it's like much more open, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And I think for especially young kids who might dream of wanting to race themselves, they can actually go and like see those drivers and just experience that in a way that Formula One feels so inaccessible.
I didn't know F1 Miami is doing that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I can actually pull up the email that we got about it just so I can read specifically what they said. If I can find it. Yeah, so Grandstand campus tickets should get you access to the GA areas in our paddock. Our mission is to get more women involved in motorsport, so our paddock is designed to be fan facing.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah, which is very cool. So keep your eyes peeled. Go and check that out if you're going to Miami this year. I also wanted to just touch on briefly, because you mentioned how F1 Academy is pumping money into the karting series and trying to start. Because I think we said this, I think F1 drivers have said this, lots of other people have said this whenever they're asked about why has there not been a woman in Formula One in a very, very long time. And everyone's answer is it's a numbers game. If you have 100 6-year-olds who are in karting and only 2 of them are girls, I'm just making these numbers up, I don't know what the exact stats are, the odds of those 2 girls getting to Formula One is so much less likely to happen than the 98 boys, right? And so the biggest issue is encouraging girls to start from a young age so that number grows and then more can progress and progress and progress until we can get one. Because I mean, there's only 20 Formula One drivers. Like the odds of even being a Formula One, it's so incredibly small. And so I guess my question is, what can F1 Academy do, and what can like we just do in general to support or encourage young people to not only get into karting, but also for like these karting series to invest in young girls too?
Yeah, I think you made a really good point that there is a lot of drop off for girls when they're like ages of like 9 or 10, because I think when we are all, kids, we all kind of want to be outside, play a sport, all those kind of things. But there is a drop off when you reach 9 or 10. And if you really think about it, it's because young girls are just not encouraged to pursue sports after a certain age. Like boys are always told to play sports, like, oh, you have to continue a sport for the rest of your life, or like not rest of your life, but like rest of like your teenage years, whatever it is. But girls are just not encouraged to do that. If a girl likes a sport, like a 10-year-old girl likes a sport, it's like odd for a lot of people. They don't expect that from them because they're just not encouraged. But I think that would change a lot if, as generally as society, maybe even at schools, just girls are just as encouraged to play a sport. I think that's number one, to kind of acknowledge that this is a cultural stereotype that we just still play into so much. And I think apart from that, I don't think this is a secret that there is this drop off that happens. And for organizations like F1 Academy, F1, maybe even some racing series in the US, I think that's where you have to begin, is by really investing in karting and like getting women and encouraging them to join karting at a very, very young age. Because like you said, it is a numbers game.
Yeah.
It is, it's just about, if there are, like you said, like much fewer women, that of course the chances of women making it to the next step is just going to be lesser. It's just math. It's like nothing to do with our abilities to not be able to drive as well, or I don't know what else, whatever everybody else is, but it's nothing to do with capabilities. It really just is about not being given equitable resources.
Mhm.
I feel like I always am very careful when I say equitable and not equal resources, because again, like, just to say that women and girls are just not encouraged, so you need that extra encouragement to get
Mhm.
them to play a sport. You need more encouragement than maybe young boys do at this stage in where we are right now in schools and society and all those things. So the key word actually is equitable. You need to give them different resources. It's not always equal, because unfortunately we don't live in
Because
an
it's not
equal world.
equal. Right.
Hello.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we really need to focus on that. We need more karting programs specifically designed for girls. Something as simple as like race suits weren't designed for women until a
Right.
couple of years ago, which is so bizarre if you really think about it. Like, our
Yeah.
bodies are completely different. If you think about sitting in a car, like, women are much smaller in frame. And I can't remember whose interview I was listening to, but someone was saying that I had to really struggle because my foot wouldn't reach the gap, like it wouldn't reach down, like I wasn't comfortable in my seat. And just like small things like that that people just don't think about, because when you're designing a race car, it's designed for a man's body. Designing a race suit, designing it for a man's body. And the same thing happens all the way down. So I think people really need to start thinking about it from that level. Like, let's say I'm a 12-year-old girl going into like racing. I'm not comfortable in the car. I'm not going to continue doing this.
Mhm.
Right.
So it's just, small things like that, which actually make a very, very big difference.
Yeah, I was gonna say you made me think of like a thousand different things. One of them being that I also feel like if I was a 8 or 9 year old and I was into like if I was a part of a karting team or something, and the other kids, every other kid that I was around was all a boy, I would,
Mhm.
I might be friends with some of them or whatever, but I'd also be like, okay, well, I'm kind of the like odd person out here. I don't have anybody else around me who maybe is like me or that I'm as close to or whatever. And I think that's a big reason too why girls maybe start to drop off is
Yeah.
because they don't have other people that are
Yeah.
like them and their friends. Because that's, I mean, sports, so much of it is the friendship and the
Yeah.
community, and you get to go and play with your friends. And
Yeah.
if you feel like you don't really have anybody around you that's like you might not want to do it. And you want
Yeah.
to go play some different sport. Also, to your point, and like why I think F1 Academy is so important is we see so often how important it is to have like a person for people
Yeah.
to watch. And like I joke about how often I bring Caitlin Clark up on this podcast, but like genuinely, she's somebody who like 6 year olds are like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with her, or
Yeah.
30 year olds or whoever.
Yeah.
Um, and they're like, I want to play basketball because she's so amazing. I see how everybody reacts about her, men, women, like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm going to now play basketball. Like,
Yeah.
you see it and then you believe that it's achievable for you. And so it's so important that girls can see that and be like, oh, okay, like I can race and the same track as Formula One cars, and I can have these cool experiences, and I can be a part of insert whatever Formula One team you like, I and that's just so important because if you don't see it, you don't believe it's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we all want role models as kids. So if
Right.
you see someone who looks like you, and like you, to your point, looks like you, or you don't feel that encouragement to be like, oh, I can actually be there. Like, you need something to visualize, to be like, oh, this is who I want to be. I want to be the next Caitlin Clark, for
Mhm.
example. So you
Exactly.
need kind of like, something to be like, yeah, I can get there.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that person, like when you look at that person, you sort of, okay, what do they do? How did they get there?
Yeah.
And the way that a, female is able to move up in the motorsport world is different than how the male is. And so I feel like,
Mhm.
and it's cool to see too, like, oh, there's this series of all girls that I could be a part of one
Yes.
day. It's not like there's a few drivers that I look up to, but I'm always going to be one of a few girls in a boys' world. It's like, no, there's a place now where you can go, and I don't know. I just think I was thinking the same thing. So I'm glad that you brought that up. But as far as F1 Academy in general, for like, how can I feel like there's a ton of different ways we can, but like, how can we support the F1 Academy, like, strategy and goals when we are at home and maybe like aren't able to go to races and support financially? Like, what are some ways that we can help keep them on the map, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say, obviously, number one is follow the series. One of the biggest things about female athletes is that their names are just not as recognized as male athletes. People are watching women's sports, but somehow, their names fall off because either like brands are not sponsoring them. So of course, they're not, all over your social media pages and all
Mhm.
those kinds of things. So this actually makes me think of, I don't know if you guys saw this campaign by a Canadian beer brand. I think, so you know what I'm talking
With their
about.
name on the lower back on their
Oh, yeah.
jersey. Yeah.
It was the
Yeah, so
hockey
it was.
jerseys, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. That was awesome.
Yeah. So it was basically that women obviously tie their hair, but the name of their name is usually on top of their jersey, so it gets hidden by their hair. So this beer brand put their logo on top and put their name at the bottom, so that their names are more recognized when they're on TV. So I think just like small things like that, I really, really like to see because, of course, I'm not saying we're all, of course, running brand strategies here, but small things like that, like trying to just make sure that you're following your drivers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you get your social media from, engage with their content and all those things. Like, it sounds silly, but honestly, social media has this power right now, this all these different algorithms that we're playing with and all of that. The more you engage with someone's content, the more likely they are to be on other people's platforms. And we really need that. We really need that, especially when Gen Z and like younger crowds, that's where they actually get their news, social media.
Hmm.
So I think it's really, really important to kind of engage with them as much as you can. I don't think it's really feasible for most people to be actually able to attend a race given how expensive it is.
Right.
But I think sitting at home, watch the races, engage with their content, talk to your friends about it, and all those kinds of things really make a bigger difference than you think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say too, like there was the whole outrage with the WNBA salaries when they were
Mhm.
announced about how much they make compared to men. And obviously a lot of it has to do with the money that gets put into these different sports leagues, which often come from viewership and how many people are actually tuning in to watch these things. And these leagues will then create deals with networks. And that's oftentimes how the athletes then get paid. And so if you want these people to get paid more money, you have to watch. Like you have to put eyeballs, and if those numbers increase, then they can raise the number that they charge for networks to pay for their rights, and and then it goes back into the athletes' pockets and whatever. And so it really is as simple as tuning in, and as you said, following people on social media, interacting with their content, talking about it when you can. If you're going to Miami, encouraging your friends or whoever to go
Mhm.
and watch one of the races, like to actually sit down in your seat and watch it. Maybe post about it on social media. All those types of things can make a difference, because it can feel very helpless. It's like, well, I don't have
Yeah.
millions and millions of dollars that I can
Mhm.
invest. I mean,
Yeah.
not yet. Someday we can have a fan behavior racing team.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. But it can feel very helpless, because you can feel like, well, what can I really do from my couch or from
Yeah.
my seat at the race? But there are a lot of things that you can do, and hopefully there's not merch, is there? Does F1 Academy have merch?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was gonna say,
Oh, they
because
need
like
to.
that's another way, I mean, we see it
Yeah.
in like a lot of other sports, but when you buy that person's jersey or their shirt
Mm.
or
Yeah.
their whatever it is, those
Yeah.
things matter too. So just putting your money or your time, your tapping powers, where your mouth is, I think is a way for us to all just make sure it sticks around. Because that's the most important thing I think we all want, is that it sticks around and it's actually viable, and that it doesn't disappear within a couple
This is allowed.
years.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I also feel like, and I think Ash Vandalay has talked about this a few times too, but a lot of these like new like skincare, makeup brands, and you know, some of the fashion brands and stuff, they are sort of taking a risk because they don't know. Like it seems like a exciting thing to do. There's obviously a high female like audience that's watching this sport, but I think reaching out even like in comments or whatever to them directly, like thanking that, like giving them attention, calling that out, because I think if they see, or even, you know, if a driver's posting about it, like in their comments, giving the driver engagement, but like calling out the brand specifically to, you know, thank them or whatever, helps, because they're doing it for the first time in a lot of aspects. A lot of these brands are doing this for the first time, and in order for them to want to continue doing it, they need to see the value and the ROI from it. So that doesn't mean you need to go buy the entire Elf skincare line, but you know, just supporting them and tagging them if you use them, or you know, whatever. I think it can't hurt anything, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Elf is doing the partnership with Catherine Legg again this year.
Yeah.
So that's great. That shows that, you know, they probably saw something last year and they want to continue it this year. So
Right. One last question for you, which is a question we got from some of our listeners. You mentioned that, you know, Lewis went through the paddock in COTA last year. We saw Hannah, we like talked about it after COTA, like, where are the other F1 drivers? Like, why is it only ever like, I mean, I guess George did go last year too. I think we did see him briefly, but he wasn't down at the like when, because I think, did he give out the trophy, Lewis, last year? I feel like he did something like with the podium.
George gave one trophy.
Oh, okay.
I think even Carlos was also there to congratulate Martha.
Yeah.
I do think that Lewis was the first one to go, which we can know and we should learn to expect at this point. But after that, I think a lot of people talked about why are there no other drivers there, and then I think the next day there actually were a bunch of drivers there.
Right, because I was going to say, it definitely seemed like it improved in the first round. Like we definitely saw a lot more drivers interacting, and part of it is the fact that now you have this. Each team has an F1 Academy driver, so that definitely helps to like bridge the gap, I guess. Not that there really needed to be that, but I guess my question is like, what do you think? What should we expect from F1 teams, drivers, in terms of supporting F1 Academy, and like what would you like to see F1 drivers? Because like, for example, I loved seeing the Williams, like their podcast thing. They had Leah as a guest with them, which I thought was like a nice integration of the team in general. But what would you like to see F1 or F1 teams do to kind of, because I feel like that's a big way to get people to know who their Academy driver is to
also, I don't know what the setup is like in Miami, but the F1 Academy paddock, it distance wise from the F1 paddock was like 15 steps. So they weren't going super out of their way to get themselves there. And not to say they didn't have another schedule of stuff, but I think it's quite easy for the social media marketing teams to figure out. They're going to be shooting content anyway. So there's a way to include the F1 Academy teams without breaking anyone's back.
Yeah, I think Zoe, I was actually going to give that example, the Williams episode, because I agree. I think that's what we need, because a lot of, people are seeing those, the Alex and Logan show because of Alex and Logan. So if you put Leah in the mix, it gives her a lot more exposure. So I think we need stuff like that. I know that, I think I read somewhere that when Lewis Hamilton posted about F1 Academy last year, it really shot up, like the social media engagement with the series really shot up. So I think we really need more drivers to be more active participants in F1 Academy. And I hate when people say like, oh, but they don't do that with F2 and F3. Well, we have to go back to being like, that's not the same. They don't need the same treatment. F1 Academy needs a little bit more of an uplifting, from F1 drivers. So I think that's what we really need. We need teams to, like, create, whether it's content or like, do like merch, to your earlier point, and things like that, to really help put them on, like our social media pages, or to give them headlines. Basically, I think it's so now it's so common to see, like, obviously, like the ESPNs, the Athletics of the world cover F1. Very few media publications still actually cover F1 Academy. This year it's improved quite a bit since last year, which to me, I'm a little surprised. I would think that last year it was like a golden opportunity. It's not being
Sure.
broadcast, so you should be writing about it more. But anywho, so I think this year it's been really great in that regard, comparatively speaking. So I think it's really just about, like, all these entities giving F1 Academy due time. Last year, like you said, Hannah, the paddocks were very close together. The F1 paddock, literally, it's probably like 15 steps. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But there were actually very few media present in the F1 Academy paddock. I was in the paddock, I only saw there a couple of creators. I didn't really see a lot of media. The F1 Academy driver, like the winners of the races, would go to the F1 paddock to do some interviews. I didn't see any media in the F1 Academy paddock, unfortunately, which was honestly very disheartening. Like, I would say that at least you should come and see the paddock. You should at least
Sure.
come see the way the garages are laid out and things like that. Like, I think those things kind of lend to more in-depth storytelling anyway. So I was a little bit surprised, and I'm hoping that's not going to be the case this year. So I think both teams and media need to take a lot more active participation in F1 Academy.
Yeah. And I don't think any of us want, like, I don't think we want anyone to, like, be, like, forced to do something. Like, you
Totally.
want to see drivers, like, that's why the Lewis thing is so great, because that he
Initiated it.
he wants to do it. He is passionate about it. He wasn't like, okay, now it's time to be taken over here.
Yeah.
You want people to want to engage. And so, and I mean, I hope that everybody, at least to some degree, understands why it's important to engage. But yeah, it doesn't take that much effort. It's not that difficult.
Well, they're already making these videos anyway. Like, and you don't want to make it inauthentic, but it's like, if you're gonna have Daniel and Yuki try food of Miami or something, like, bring someone into that. Like, there's ways that you're already filming content, and, like, can you include the F1 Academy driver in that and still make it fun? Cause sort of like the podcast, but just because I feel like, at least for me, I'm a story person. Like, I don't, I have a lot to learn about these girls and their personalities, and I think that only helps kind of get yourself more invested. So
yeah. And now that that all the races are happening on F1 race weekends, like, it's just everything is just matching perfectly. And
Yes.
all these F1 drivers, they do have other media commitments, just completely understandable.
Totally.
And of course, you don't want to force anyone, but my question, I always go back to, I don't want to force you, but why don't you want to do this?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So, which, I understand some people can just be like, oh, maybe they just don't want to. I'm like, yeah, sure, but why?
Yeah.
But I do feel like there's just so much more you can do with, like, fun content, or like anything. Like, just come and visit the paddock. Like, I think even like a visit can do so many things. It can also, if I spoke with a couple of the drivers after the series last year. I was very lucky to actually have Martha on the podcast right after she'd won the championship. And she told me how it was amazing for her to see, like, Lewis Hamilton is waiting to congratulate her.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I was just standing on the podium and I could see him waiting for me.
Yeah.
And it was an
It just gave me
amazing feeling.
goosebumps.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah.
That was an amazing feeling. And I'm like,
Yeah.
even if you put aside, like, all the content, marketing things, it's just nice encouragement to give all these young drivers. They deserve that.
Yeah.
Especially Lewis Hamilton of all of them. That's like what I mean.
King.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
icon.
There is no other way to describe him.
Exactly. Well, Manvi, thank you so much for coming on, for talking F1 Academy, sharing all your wisdom and knowledge. We are eternally grateful. We hope people listening got a little bit out of this, are excited for the weekend ahead, are going to tune in. I know Hannah and I will be there. You will be there making content, watching. So we're very excited. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm always here to talk about F1 Academy things. And I'm so glad that you guys are actually using your platform to talk about F1 Academy. I mean, I know you guys have always been supportive of the series, but it's just nice to see other people also having these conversations.
Of course. Well, you know how we end our show.
I do.
So I would
Should I say it?
I would love it if you could end us with an enchante. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm preparing.
Yeah.
Okay, enchanté.
So good.
Excellent.